Sometimes the strongest person in the parking lot is the one everyone mistakes for invisible. The little girl's voice trembled before anyone else even noticed what was happening. "Daddy, please help her." Nathan Brooks stopped walking. One hand still held the paper grocery bag he had picked up on the way home. The other rested lightly on the shoulder of his 9-year-old daughter, Emily. Around them, dozens of people moved through the school parking lot beneath the fading gold light of a Virginia autumn evening. Parents loaded backpacks into SUVs. Teachers carried stacks of papers toward their cars. Engines hummed. Doors slammed. Life continued as if nothing unusual was happening. But Emily had seen something nobody else wanted to see. Near the far corner of the lot, beside a silver sedan, a woman stood uncomfortably surrounded by 3 men whose presence had drawn nervous glances from passers-by. Nobody appeared eager to get involved. Nobody wanted trouble at the end of a long day. Emily tightened her grip on her father's hand. "Daddy," she whispered again, her blue eyes filling with concern. She looked scared. Nathan followed her gaze. His expression didn't change. It rarely did. Most people at Pine Ridge Middle School knew him only as the janitor. The quiet man who arrived before sunrise. The man who mopped hallways, fixed broken lockers, and carried boxes nobody else wanted to carry. Students barely noticed him. Parents rarely remembered his name. To most of the world, Nathan Brooks existed somewhere between the background and the shadows. But Emily knew better. She had always known better. Nathan set the grocery bag down beside a shopping cart return and looked toward the woman. The cool evening breeze stirred through the parking lot, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. Fluorescent lights flickered to life above the school entrance. For a brief moment, everything seemed strangely still. Then Nathan spoke. "Stay right here, sweetheart." Emily nodded. She trusted him completely. Not because he was the strongest man she knew. Not because he always had the answers. But because he never walked away when someone needed help. Nathan crossed the asphalt at an unhurried pace. No anger. No dramatic gestures. No attempt to draw attention. Just calm, steady steps. The kind of steps that came from a man who had spent years learning that true strength rarely needed to announce itself. A few nearby parents noticed him approaching and exchanged curious glances. One teacher paused beside her vehicle. Another pulled out a phone, uncertain whether she should call security. The woman looked up as Nathan arrived. Relief flashed briefly across her face. One of the men turned toward him and laughed softly. Whatever was said next was lost beneath the sound of a passing pickup truck and the rustling trees. But within moments, the tension dissolved. The confrontation ended. The woman was safe. And 3 men who had moments earlier commanded the space suddenly found themselves leaving under the watchful eyes of dozens of witnesses. Silence settled across the parking lot. Confused silence. Uncomfortable silence. Nobody seemed to understand exactly what they had just seen. Nathan simply checked that the woman was all right, gave a polite nod, and turned back toward his daughter. No celebration. No speeches. No demand for recognition. Just dignity. Just grace. Just a father returning to his child. But as Emily ran into his arms, neither of them noticed the black government sedan parked across the street. And neither of them could have imagined that less than 24 hours later, a United States Navy admiral would step out of a convoy and ask a question that would leave the entire school standing in stunned silence. "Where can I find Chief Nathan Brooks?" The next morning arrived with the kind of gray coastal sky that made the world feel quieter than usual. Pine Ridge Middle School sat beneath a blanket of low clouds while a cool breeze swept fallen leaves across the parking lot. Long before students filled the hallways, Nathan Brooks was already at work. The soft hum of fluorescent lights echoed through the empty corridors as he pushed a cleaning cart past rows of lockers. To most people, it was an ordinary job. To Nathan, it was simply another responsibility that deserved to be done well. He checked every classroom door, replaced burned-out light bulbs, and fixed a loose handrail near the gym entrance before the first school bus arrived. Nobody asked him to do those extra things. He just believed that if something was worth doing, it was worth doing right. By 7:15, the building had begun to wake up. Teachers carried coffee cups into their classrooms. Students gathered in small groups near the front entrance. The familiar sounds of lockers closing and sneakers squeaking against polished floors slowly replaced the morning silence. Nathan remained nearly invisible among them. Most students passed him without a second glance. Some parents barely acknowledged him at all. He was simply the janitor, the man with the keys, the man who cleaned up after everyone else went home. Yet if anyone had taken the time to watch carefully, they might have noticed small details that did not quite fit the picture they had created. They might have noticed how Nathan seemed aware of everything happening around him without appearing distracted. They might have noticed the calm confidence in his posture or the quiet discipline in the way he moved through crowded hallways. But people rarely look closely at those they consider ordinary. Emily certainly noticed. She sat in the cafeteria before classes began, eating breakfast while watching her father replace a ceiling panel near the entrance. Her friend Madison leaned across the table. "Your dad works harder than anyone here." Emily smiled proudly. "He always does." Madison shrugged. "My dad says your dad never talks much." Emily glanced toward Nathan. "He talks when it matters." Across the building, Claire Whitmore stood beside the music room window organizing sheet music for her morning choir class. She had slept poorly. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the previous evening in the parking lot. More specifically, she remembered Nathan. The situation itself had ended quickly and peacefully, yet something about him continued to bother her in a way she could not explain. It was not what he had done. It was how he had carried himself. There had been no panic, no attempt to impress anyone, no need for recognition afterward. Just quiet. Certainty. Claire looked down into the courtyard below where Nathan was helping a student retrieve books that had spilled from a backpack. The student thanked him before hurrying away. Nathan simply returned to work. Claire frowned thoughtfully. "Who are you really?" she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, life continued as normal throughout Pine Ridge. Morning announcements played through classroom speakers. Teachers prepared lessons. Students worried about quizzes and weekend football games. Nobody knew that several miles away, a convoy of black government vehicles had already entered the county. Nobody knew that uniformed personnel were reviewing photographs and records connected to a man most of the town barely noticed. And certainly nobody knew that before lunchtime, Pine Ridge Middle School would become the center of a story far bigger than any of them could imagine. By mid-morning, Claire Whitmore had convinced herself that she was being unreasonable. Pine Ridge Middle School was full of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Teachers taught. Students learned. Parents hurried from one responsibility to the next. There was no reason to believe the quiet janitor moving through the halls carried some hidden story. And yet every time she saw Nathan Brooks, that feeling returned. During her second choir period, she noticed him through the narrow window beside the classroom door. He was repairing a loose display case outside the library. Nothing unusual about that. Still, the way he worked caught her attention. Every movement seemed deliberate. Every tool returned precisely to its place. Even his posture reflected a discipline she could not explain. When the bell rang, students flooded the hallway. Nathan stepped aside to let them pass, offering polite smiles and small words of encouragement. Most hurried by without noticing. A few thanked him. One young boy dropped a stack of notebooks, and before anyone else reacted, Nathan was already helping gather them. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks," the boy said. Nathan nodded. "Have a good class, buddy." Simple words. Simple moment. Yet Claire found herself watching longer than she intended. Later that morning, she crossed paths with Emily near the music room. The girl carried a folder of artwork tucked beneath her arm. "Your father seems busy today," Claire said with a smile. Emily's face brightened instantly. "He is always busy. You must be proud of him." Emily looked surprised by the question. "Of course I am." Then she lowered her voice slightly. "People do not really know him." Claire hesitated. "What do you mean?" Emily glanced down the hallway toward where Nathan was replacing ceiling tiles near the cafeteria entrance. "Everybody thinks he is just a janitor." The statement lingered in Claire's mind long after Emily walked away. Just a janitor. Just. Such a small word. Such a powerful one. The school continued moving through its routines while dark clouds gathered beyond the football field. Teachers prepared lessons. Students completed assignments. The scent of cafeteria pizza drifted through the corridors as lunchtime approached. Yet an unusual tension seemed to hang quietly beneath the surface. Shortly before noon, Principal Harris stepped from his office holding a tablet. His normally relaxed expression had vanished. Two assistant administrators followed close behind, whispering urgently. Staff members noticed immediately. Questions spread through the building. Had something happened? Was there an emergency? Nobody seemed to know. Near the maintenance closet, Nathan continued organizing supplies. He appeared completely unaffected by the growing curiosity around him. Claire watched from a distance. How can someone stay that calm? She wondered. Outside, the sky darkened further. Then came a sound that did not belong to an ordinary school day. The low rumble of multiple engines. At first it was distant, then closer. Students near classroom windows began pointing toward the front entrance. Teachers paused mid-sentence. Secretaries looked up from their desks. The convoy had arrived. Black vehicles rolled slowly through the school gates and across the visitor parking area, one after another. Quiet, purposeful, official. Conversations stopped. Questions multiplied. Nathan looked out the nearest window for only a second before returning to his work. But Claire noticed something no one else did. For the first time all day, the faintest shadow crossed his expression. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. The front office windows overlooked the visitor parking lot, and within minutes nearly every available view in the building was occupied. Students stood on tiptoe. Teachers gathered near doorways. Even Principal Harris found himself staring through the glass as the convoy came to a stop. The vehicles were spotless, their dark paint reflecting the cloudy afternoon sky. Uniformed personnel stepped out first, moving with quiet professionalism. Then a final rear door opened. A tall man in a navy dress uniform emerged. Silver hair, impeccable posture, decades of service visible in every measured step. The conversations inside Pine Ridge Middle School faded almost instantly. Nobody needed an explanation to recognize authority when they saw it. Principal Harris hurried outside with two administrators close behind. Claire watched from the main hallway as students pressed closer to the windows. Questions echoed from every direction. Was this a ceremony? An inspection? A security issue? Nobody seemed to know. Outside, the officer removed his cap briefly and exchanged a few words with the principal. The administrator's expression changed immediately. First confusion, then surprise, then something close to disbelief. Through the glass, Claire could see Principal Harris glance back toward the school building, toward the maintenance wing, toward the place where Nathan spent most of his day. A strange silence settled over her. The officer spoke again. Principal Harris nodded quickly. Inside the school, a secretary received a call moments later. She listened, looked up suddenly, and covered the receiver. They are asking for Nathan Brooks. The words spread through the office like a gust of wind. Nathan? One teacher repeated. The janitor? Another staff member laughed nervously. There must be another Nathan Brooks. But there was not. Meanwhile, Nathan was in a storage room replacing inventory labels on maintenance supplies. The task required patience, and patience was something he had never lacked. He heard footsteps approaching before the knock. Arrived. 3 quick taps. He opened the door to find Principal Harris standing there, slightly out of breath. Nathan. Yes, sir. There is someone here to see you. Nathan studied the principal's face for a moment. I see. The principal blinked. You know who it is? Nathan set down the marker in his hand. For the first time all day, he allowed himself a small sigh. Not frustration, not concern, more like the acceptance of something inevitable finally arriving. I have an idea. Together they walked toward the front entrance. Students lined the hallways pretending not to stare. Teachers paused conversations as he passed. Claire stood near the music room doorway, watching carefully. Nathan's pace never changed. He did not appear nervous. He did not appear excited. If anything, he looked exactly as he had looked every morning for years. Calm, steady, unmoved by attention. When they reached the entrance, the officer was already waiting. The moment he saw Nathan, he stopped walking. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then something happened that no one expected. The distinguished Navy officer straightened completely and offered a formal salute. Gasps echoed through the lobby. Principal Harris froze. Claire stared in disbelief. Students looked from one face to the other, unable to understand what they were witnessing. The officer lowered his hand slowly. His voice carried through the stunned silence. Chief Nathan Brooks. It is an honor to see you again, sir. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The lobby seemed suspended in time. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights filled the silence while dozens of eyes remained fixed on Nathan Brooks and the distinguished officer standing before him. Nathan returned the salute with calm respect, neither hurried nor dramatic. It was the gesture of a man familiar with duty, a man who had performed the same motion countless times long before Pine Ridge Middle School ever knew his name. The officer smiled warmly. The expression transformed his formal appearance into something far more personal. "It has been too many years, Chief," he said. Nathan nodded. "Good to see you too, Admiral Hayes." A ripple of astonishment moved through the crowd. Students exchanged confused looks. Teachers stared openly. Principal Harris looked as though someone had rewritten reality in front of him. Claire could hardly process what she was hearing. "Chief, Admiral." The words felt completely disconnected from the quiet maintenance worker she had watched fixing lockers only hours earlier. Admiral Hayes glanced around the lobby. His experienced eyes seemed to understand immediately what everyone was thinking. "I apologize for the interruption," he said politely. "But I have spent several years trying to locate a man who prefers not to be found." A few nervous laughs echoed through the room. Nathan offered a faint smile. "I have been busy." "That is one way to describe it," Hayes replied. The Admiral reached into a leather portfolio carried by one of his aides. He withdrew a framed certificate and a dark blue presentation case. The sight of the items instantly commanded attention. Even the students sensed that something significant was happening. "Yesterday," Hayes continued, "I received a report regarding an incident in this community. During the review process, a familiar name appeared." He looked directly at Nathan. A name that should never have been forgotten. The room grew even quieter. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the front windows. Gray light filtered through the glass, casting long reflections across the polished floor. Admiral Hayes opened the presentation case. Inside rested a medal mounted against deep blue velvet. Gasps spread through the crowd. Nathan's expression remained unchanged. Claire noticed that. Most people would have appeared overwhelmed. Nathan looked almost uncomfortable, as though recognition was something he had spent years avoiding. "Many years ago," Hayes said, "this man served with extraordinary honor. His leadership protected lives. His courage inspired those around him. His character reminded us what service truly means." He paused briefly. "Including me." The statement landed heavily. Principal Harris blinked. "You mean he served under you?" Hayes shook his head. "No," the Admiral's voice softened. "There was a time when I served under him." The lobby fell, completely silent. Students who had never cared about military history suddenly leaned forward. Teachers who had walked past Nathan for years stood speechless. Claire felt her heartbeat quicken. Every assumption she had made about him seemed to crumble one after another. Yet the most remarkable thing was not the medal. It was not the convoy. It was not even the Admiral. It was Nathan himself, standing there in a simple maintenance uniform, looking exactly the same as he had looked every morning before sunrise. The same quiet man, the same humble father, the same steady presence. And somehow that made the truth even more powerful. Because greatness had been walking these hallways every day, and almost nobody had noticed. The lobby slowly began to breathe again, but the atmosphere had changed forever. Students whispered to one another. Teachers exchanged stunned glances. Principal Harris stood motionless beside the reception desk, as though he were still trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the same man. Admiral Hayes closed the presentation case and looked toward Nathan with genuine respect. "You never told them, did you?" Nathan shook his head. There was no reason to. The answer seemed to surprise many people in the room. In a world where accomplishments were often displayed and celebrated, Nathan had hidden his. Not because he was ashamed. Not because he wanted attention later. Simply because he believed his past belonged in the past. Claire watched him carefully. The more she learned about him, the less she understood. Most people who had achieved something extraordinary wanted recognition. Nathan seemed almost relieved whenever attention moved elsewhere. "You served for more than 20 years, Admiral Hayes said. "You trained some of the finest sailors our country has ever produced. You received commendations most people only read about. Then you disappeared." Nathan glanced toward a nearby hallway where students were quietly gathering. "I did not disappear." Hayes followed his gaze. "No." Nathan smiled faintly. "I became a father." The words landed with surprising force. Even the Admiral seemed moved by the simplicity of the answer. Across the lobby, Emily stood beside a group of students. Unlike everyone else, she did not appear shocked. Proud, yes. Emotional, certainly. But not surprised. This was her father. The man who packed school lunches, checked homework, repaired bicycles, and sat through every music recital. Whatever he had done before, she had always known the person he truly was. The rain outside intensified, streaking the windows with silver lines. The school day had effectively stopped. Nobody cared about schedules anymore. They cared about the story unfolding before them. Admiral Hayes turned toward the gathered staff. "You see a maintenance worker." He paused. "I see a leader who spent years protecting others without asking for credit." His eyes moved back to Nathan. And apparently he still does. Claire immediately thought about the parking lot. About the previous evening. About the quiet way Nathan had stepped forward when someone needed help. No boasting. No anger. No desire to be noticed afterward. Suddenly everything made sense. It was not an act of courage that surprised her anymore. It was the consistency of it. The same character that had guided him years ago was still guiding him now. Different uniform. Same man. Principal Harris finally found his voice. "Nathan, why did you never tell anyone?" Nathan considered the question carefully. "Because respect means more when it comes from who you are today, not who you were yesterday." Silence followed. Deep silence. The kind that settles over people when they hear something true. Claire lowered her eyes briefly. Several teachers did the same. They realized how many times they had walked past him without really seeing him. How often they had mistaken humility for insignificance. Then Emily stepped forward through the crowd and slipped her hand into her father's. Nathan looked down and smiled. In that moment, the decorated veteran, the respected chief, and the quiet school janitor all seemed to disappear. What remained was something even greater. A good man standing beside the daughter he loved more than any medal, title, or honor he had ever received. The rain continued through the afternoon, drumming softly against the windows while Pine Ridge Middle School slowly returned to its routine. Classes resumed. Hallways emptied. Announcements were made. Yet nothing felt quite the same. News of what had happened spread faster than any official statement ever could. By the final bell, students were telling stories. Teachers were exchanging conversations in hushed voices. Parents waiting in pickup lines spoke about the mysterious Navy Admiral, and the janitor nobody seemed to know. Through it all, Nathan remained exactly where he always was. He repaired a leaking sink in the science wing. He replaced a damaged ceiling tile near the cafeteria. He helped a student retrieve a lost backpack from the gym. The attention surrounding him seemed unable to change him in the slightest. Claire noticed that more than anyone. As the building emptied, she found herself walking toward the maintenance office. The small room sat near the rear hallway beside the boiler controls. She hesitated before knocking. "Come in," Nathan called. Inside, shelves were neatly organized with tools, supplies, and maintenance records. Everything had its place. Nathan was reviewing a work order when Claire entered. "I hope I am not interrupting." Nathan smiled politely. "Not at all." Claire folded her arms. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She looked directly at him. "Why stay here?" Nathan seemed unsurprised by the question. "What do you mean? You could be anywhere. You have experience, recognition, connections. Yet you chose this." Nathan glanced toward a framed photograph sitting quietly on a nearby shelf. It showed a younger version of himself beside a smiling woman and a much younger Emily. The photograph had softened with age. "After my wife passed away," he said gently, "Emily needed stability more than I needed titles." Claire followed his gaze. Understanding settled over her. "So you gave everything up?" Nathan shook his head. No, his voice remained calm. "I gained something better." Outside the office window, students boarded the final buses of the day. The sky had begun to brighten as the rain moved east. Golden sunlight broke through the clouds and painted long reflections across the wet pavement. Claire looked back at Nathan. "Do you ever miss it?" He thought for a moment. "Some days I miss the people." Another pause. "But I have never regretted choosing my daughter." The honesty in his answer left Claire unexpectedly emotional. She realized that the most remarkable thing about Nathan was not his service record. It was not the medals. It was not even the respect shown by Admiral Hayes. It was the quiet sacrifices nobody had seen. The choices made when no audience was watching. The kind of character that revealed itself only through years of ordinary actions. As she prepared to leave, a small knock sounded at the office door. Emily stepped inside carrying a folded piece of paper. "Daddy." Nathan looked up immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." Emily handed him the paper with a shy smile. "I drew something." Nathan opened it carefully. Inside was a simple drawing. A little girl holding hands with her father beneath an American flag. Above them were 3 handwritten words. "My hero forever." For the first time that day, Nathan's eyes grew slightly damp. He knelt beside his daughter and pulled her into a hug. Claire quietly turned away, giving them privacy. Because in that small maintenance office, she finally understood something important. The greatest honor Nathan Brooks had ever earned was not hanging inside a presentation case. It was standing right beside him, holding his hand. The following morning dawned bright and clear, as if the storm had carried away more than clouds. Sunlight poured across Pine Ridge Middle School, glinting off damp sidewalks and freshly washed windows. Yet the biggest change was not outside. It was inside the hearts of the people who walked through those doors. Students greeted Nathan by name. Teachers who had once hurried past him now stopped to shake his hand. Parents who barely noticed him before offered warm smiles and words of appreciation. Nathan accepted every gesture with the same quiet grace he had always shown. Nothing about him seemed different, even though everything around him had changed. During lunch, Principal Harris made an unexpected announcement. Faculty members gathered in the library while several student representatives filled the front rows. Claire sat near the center, curious about what was coming. Nathan arrived reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable being the focus of attention. Emily sat beside him, smiling proudly. Principal Harris stepped to the podium and cleared his throat. Yesterday reminded us of something important, he began. We often measure people by titles, appearances, or assumptions. Sometimes we forget to look deeper. The room grew quiet. For years, Nathan Brooks has served this school with integrity, kindness, and humility. Not because anyone was watching, but because that is who he is. Heads nodded throughout the audience. Several teachers lowered their eyes, remembering moments when they had overlooked him. Principal Harris continued. Character is revealed in ordinary days, in small acts, in consistent choices. He smiled toward Nathan. And no one has demonstrated that more clearly than you. Applause filled the room. Not loud or dramatic at first. Genuine. Respectful. The kind that comes from gratitude rather than excitement. Nathan stood slowly. The applause grew stronger. Students rose to their feet. Teachers followed. Soon the entire library was standing. Emily's eyes shone with pride. Nathan waited patiently for the room to settle. Then he stepped toward the microphone. Thank you, he said softly. The crowd immediately quieted. But I think there is something worth remembering. He paused briefly. Every person in this building matters. The room listened carefully. The teachers matter. The students matter. The cafeteria workers matter. The custodians matter. The office staff matter. His eyes moved across the audience. The moment we start believing some people are more valuable than others, we stop seeing what makes a community strong. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Thoughtful silence. The kind that arrives when truth reaches people at exactly the right moment. Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. She realized Nathan was doing what he had always done. Teaching. Not through speeches or authority, but through example. When the gathering ended, students lingered to speak with him. Teachers thanked him personally. Parents approached with newfound respect. Yet Nathan's favorite moment came later that afternoon, when Emily slipped her hand into his as they walked toward the parking lot. Daddy, she said. Yes, sweetheart. She looked up at him. I am glad everybody finally sees who you are. Nathan smiled gently. The late afternoon sun painted the sky gold beyond the football field. Maybe, he said. But what matters most is that you always did. Emily hugged his arm as they continued walking together. And for Nathan Brooks, that simple truth meant more than every medal, every rank, and every honor that had ever carried his name. Weeks passed, and life at Pine Ridge Middle School gradually settled back into familiar rhythms. The excitement faded. The stories became memories. New assignments, football games, choir performances, and daily routines reclaimed everyone's attention. Yet something subtle had changed. Students held doors open more often. Teachers greeted support staff by name. Parents seemed slower to judge and quicker to appreciate. It was not a dramatic transformation. It was something quieter, something deeper. On a cool Friday afternoon in early November, the school hosted its annual community appreciation event. Families filled the gymnasium. Folding chairs stretched across the polished floor. Banners hung from the rafters. The scent of popcorn drifted through the air while children laughed and ran between rows of seats. Nathan arrived as he always did, hoping to stay unnoticed. Emily walked beside him carrying a small program booklet. You know they are going to recognize you again, she said with a grin. Nathan shook his head. I hope not. Emily laughed. That is exactly why they will. The gym lights dimmed slightly as Principal Harris stepped onto the stage. One by one, teachers, volunteers, and community members received recognition for their contributions. Applause filled the room repeatedly. Then the principal paused. There is one final person we would like to thank. Nathan immediately lowered his eyes. Emily smiled knowingly. Across the gym, Claire Whitmore hid a small smile of her own. This individual taught us a lesson none of us expected. Principal Harris continued. Not through a speech, not through a title, but through character. A large photograph appeared on the projection screen behind him. It was not a military photograph. It was not an image of medals or uniforms. It showed Nathan helping a student pick up scattered books in the hallway. The audience grew quiet. We learned that dignity does not need attention, Harris said. We learned that respect grows from kindness. And we learned that some heroes wear ordinary work clothes. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause echoed throughout the gymnasium. Nathan looked uncomfortable as hundreds of people stood before him. But then something unexpected happened. Students began standing first, then parents, then teachers. Finally, every person in the building was on their feet. Not because of what Nathan had done years ago, not because of military service, not because an admiral had arrived. They were standing because of the man he had chosen to be every single day afterward. Emily slipped her hand into his. Go on, Daddy. Slowly, Nathan walked to the stage. The applause continued. Principal Harris stepped aside and handed him the microphone. The gym eventually quieted. Nathan looked out at the crowd. Families, students, friends, neighbors, people he had quietly served for years. He smiled softly. Thank you. He paused. But if there is one thing I hope everyone remembers, it is this. The room listened. You never really know what someone is carrying. You never know their story. So choose kindness first. Silence settled across the gym. Warm, reflective, powerful. Because every person deserves respect. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the applause returned, stronger than before. As the evening came to an end and families slowly headed home beneath a sky filled with stars, Nathan and Emily walked toward their old pickup truck. The cold November air carried the scent of pine trees and distant fireplaces. Emily looked up at her father and smiled. I told you they would see it someday. Nathan opened the passenger door for her and smiled back. See what? Emily squeezed his hand. The hero. Nathan looked across the quiet parking lot, then up, toward the stars. Maybe, he said gently, or maybe they finally saw what matters most. And as father and daughter drove home through the peaceful Virginia night, the world seemed wonderfully quiet, because true dignity never needed to shout to be remembered.